Okay, so we're in the meeting with Anna Soubry, fringe meeting at the Novotel Hotel, and it is packed.
As long as we can let Justin Green.
Yes. Oh, it's Laura Koonsberg's team. It is absolutely jam-packed in here. You couldn't swing a cat. And this is the meeting. If you're joining us, that's the meeting. Conservative for a people's vote. It's a meeting to be in.
There's more space at the back.
Come on over here. Come and join our band. See, Mark.
Very good.
So they're going to squeeze people into this little space now too. Oops, there goes the water.
I can't get out, it's physically impossible. It's in the wedge room.
Hi, Kate. That's like school assembly, isn't it?
Pardon?
Like school assembly.
Oh, wonderful, isn't it? Yes, yes. I don't want to get in the way of the candles.
Oh. People going behind speakers.
Oh.
Sorry, behind us.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. Thank you.
Okay.
So Barbara's added a Union Jack to the Bar for Europe hat. Very.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our meeting Respecting Democracy. It should perhaps be called Respecting Free Speech, because as you know, we're one of the meetings that the party refused to put in the conference handbook or on the website. And I'd like to say a big thank you to Brandon Lewis for that, because look what happened. I'm chairman of this movement, Conservatives for People's Vote, and I'm the least important person at the table. Our president is Neil Carmichael, who, as you know, was swept away in the deluge in 2017 from Stroud, and a sad loss to all his parliamentary colleagues. I know he was. We also, of course, have the Right Honourable Anna Soubry. We will very shortly have the Right Honourable Justine Greening, and we have Dr. Philip Lee. And I'm going to ask Neil to kick off proceedings. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Simon. It's the first time I have ever decided to take a picture of the audience when I'm on a panel, because I'm so pleased to see you all here. This is such an important issue, and your presence here outside the secure zone, as Simon has just reminded us, is a real testimony to just how important this matter actually is. And you know what? It's about our national interest. It's about making sure this country makes the right decision. It's about making sure we do so on the right facts. And it's about making sure we do so knowing what the actual deal or no deal actually means. Not just for us, not just for the people you know, but for the people, young people, children, the next generations. They need to be reassured that we did the right thing during these difficult times. And I, for one, will not stop until we actually get a really proper debate based on the facts before us and based on our national interest.
Yeah.
That's what
Justine Greenman just arrived.
wow, this is quite good. The second most important thing is, when you're doing something like this, of this seismic importance, it has to be legitimised. You cannot do something ripping up our national future, destroying our jobs, destroying the hopes of our country in terms of internationalism, without at least consulting the people whether or not they want to do it. Because you know what? When it goes wrong, if we allow it to happen, somebody will start getting the blame. And we do not want that to happen. What we want to be sure of is that everybody, collectively, together, has had a share in this big decision. So it is about legitimacy. It is about making sure that what we decide to do does pass the test of being legitimate. And the it's a third point. When I was a Member of Parliament, I often consulted my constituents about a range of things, and many of them will not be surprised to know I didn't always agree with them. Because the important thing is that Members of Parliament actually have a responsibility to think about what is going on, to be ready and brave enough to make the kind of decisions that this country actually needs. So the third big point I would make is that the RMPs, and I used to be one of them, and I know how tough it can be, must rise up and simply say, this country's future is more important than my own. Because, you know, the thing is, what we also have to do is express a really strong view about what Britain actually has for its future, why it was important for us to join the common market as it then was, why we did make such an impact on its future, why we did actually shape the single market, which we apparently just do not like anymore. But that was one of our great achievements during the 1980s. And we didn't stop there, because we have actually been responsible in part for the enlargement of the European Union. And it is a great source of happiness to me, knowing that all of the people in Poland, the Czech Republic, Hungary and elsewhere are democratic, are enjoying economic growth, and are actually fulfilling their national ambition by being part of the European Union. And we should be proud of that. So it's not just a question of legitimacy, it's not just a question of getting the facts right, it's a question about our vision, about our future, about our national character, and where we stand as people in this Conservative Party. And the final thing I will say is this. The last time the Tory Party smashed away the future of our country by interfering with free trade was actually in 1906, when we came along with the idea of imperial preference, because we hadn't learned from the previous time over Corn Laws. So here we are, time number 3, threatening the very lifeblood of our economy and the future of our country, and we must have a vote about that, if nothing else.
Hear, hear.
Neil. We need more of it. Can I begin by thanking People's Vote for organising this meeting, despite the fact that it was removed from the handbook, which was actually my moment in politics. Actually, I went to to have that sort of Frankie Goes to Hollywood moment of being banned. For those of you who remember Relax in 1984, and suddenly it goes to number 1. Well, judging by this attendance, I think it's had a counterproductive response. If our party is not about freedom of speech, if our party is not about being able to debate the difficult issues of the day openly and honestly, then what is it about? Ludicrous decision, and I'm embarrassed. But what is it that is feared here? Is it because there's a threat that actually that this is getting some momentum, excuse the use of the word, this belief that actually that the public should be consulted again, that we shouldn't discuss it here at the Conservative Party conference? I tell you what really, really irritates me most is the suggestion, the hint, the implied thought that somehow I am less patriotic. For 26 years I have been a member of the Conservative Party. 26 years. I joined to support John Major's election. In March I joined, 1992. And for 24 years my position on the European Union and our membership thereof was the same as the Conservative Party. And yet a couple of years ago, without apparently any vote taking place or any debate, dare I say, on the fringe of the Conservative Party, it was decided that suddenly we were the party of Brexit. Yeah. Even though, by my estimation, the majority of Conservative voters in my constituency voted Remain, suddenly we became that party. No, we didn't. And I think this event shows that we didn't 2 years ago, which is why I'm so encouraged by this meeting. Now, why a people's vote? Well, I resigned in June from government because I realised, I looked ahead and thought, this isn't going to work out terribly well. There's going to be gridlock in Parliament. There isn't a majority for any particular outcome here, be it a Brexit form of outcome or indeed Remain. There's just no majority. So the reality is I can't vote for whatever comes, whatever political fudge which will be agreed that appears, because I can't see it as honouring in 2016, because it will be neither full Brexit or full Remain. So in terms of talking about honouring the referendum, I don't quite see how that honours the referendum. But above all, I knew I couldn't vote for it because I thought it was the worst of both worlds. If we're going to do it, let's go buccaneering off. I sort of follow the intellectual logic of Jacob and his friends. I don't share it, but at least it's consistent. It sees a world which I don't see. I see a world of threats from pandemics, from financial contagion, from environmental degradation, from pressures of migration. All of these things ignore national boundaries. And whenever I ask Brexiteers, who, by the way, have the responsibility to have the plan here, and we're 2.5 years on and we still don't have one, whenever I ask them, well, okay, in this great new world, buccaneering away, Dad's Army, Rule Britannia-esque, how on earth are we going to confront pandemics, financial contagion, environmental degradation? And it's not a, you know, this list could go on. I don't get an answer. And correct me if I'm wrong, I've not seen that speech. They haven't thought about the world as it is. And that troubles me, which is why I think we need to seek the further consent of the people. But I also actually think there's a party needs to get a grip here. On Saturday, I was in Bracknell. I know this happened up and down the country. And there was this moment, I wish I'd videoed it. You were much quicker on your camera with your clip. This angry man strode up, threw his coloured ball in the note of a referendum, stormed off. At the same time, in a much more controlled, calm way, this young mother with a buggy put the ball in the wanting a people's referendum. And in that moment, I thought, how is the Conservative Party, how has the party itself got itself on the side of angry men and against women and young people? Where does that take us? I don't think it takes us anywhere good. So when whips put me up against the wall and say, you don't vote for this, you're going to deliver Corbyn, I will argue passionately, I vote for this, you get Corbyn.
Absolutely.
Because every single socio-economic ill that takes place between now and the next general election is going to be blamed on Tory Brexit.
Absolutely.
Whether right or wrong, it's irrelevant. I can see these posters looming large. And what am I to say to that woman? To her child in a few years' time when she can talk, oh yeah, we just stood idly by, we were not able to do anything about it. It was the will of the people, a phrase I resent greatly, which brings me actually to my final point, which is about the health of our democracy. And it's actually, Neil's already mentioned this. When I was elected as a Member of Parliament, I wasn't going to be a delegate, I was going to be a trustee. I was elected to represent the best interests of everybody in my constituency, irrespective of how they voted. I'm told I'm supposed to suspend my cognitive abilities on Brexit, that I'm not allowed to make a judgment about whether it is right or wrong and in the best interests of my constituents. I fundamentally disagree with that. I fundamentally disagree with it. Where else are we going to have a plebiscite of the people? And I note actually that the strongest correlation, by the way, with Brexit is the death penalty. People supporting Brexit. The strongest correlation, it's not age or sex or anything else, it's the death penalty. We're going to have a plebiscite on that. Am I supposed to suspend my judgment on the death penalty when it comes? Where are we going with this? It is important that members of Parliament exercise their judgment on this issue. So important. We only get to a people's vote if this deal doesn't pass through the House. And I think we all know that there is a majority of the House who think this is not the right way forward for our country. So it's about time, particularly Conservative colleagues who think that they stood up and were counted. We've done it, and I might add, I think it's just Anna and I, in the polling that was done, both of our constituencies, according to the sophisticated polling, have gone from Brexit to Remain in the last year or so. I would say to colleagues, stand up. Actually, there is an electoral bounty to be had. But finally, and I really believe this strongly, I was asked a question at the previous meeting about diplomacy, about Britain's role in the world and how Britain was being viewed around the world. And I said it's a long-term frustration of mine that we don't discuss foreign policy in Parliament at all, hardly, not enough. And that we hadn't actually had a conversation about what Britain's role could be, or indeed, I should add, should be in this world. A world where the population has doubled in my lifetime. A world that arguably is on an unsustainable path. There's going to be movements of people like you wouldn't believe, seeking work, heat, food, water. In this world, my Parliament, our Parliament, has a responsibility to discuss these issues in depth. Because if you go around the world, every single diplomat, every single person I've met in European countries and further afield, they think Britain's lost the plot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Convinced that the reasonable people who voted Brexit, sometimes I think with legitimate concerns about the pace of immigration and migration, knew about that in 2016, knew the impact that this would have. Which brings me to my final point. In June, when I resigned, I used the term informed consent. I took this term from my medical practice. Any doctors in the room will know that before you proceed with an operation, you have to secure the informed consent of the patient. So the patient can decide to have an operation, but then subsequent to that, we'll have a discussion with the surgeon and the anaesthetist about the risks and benefits of proceeding. And before you proceed, you have to have a signed consent form. If it's right for surgery, then it's right for this Brexit deal. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
Next, can I introduce Anna Soubry, who needs no introduction.
Hey.
One of the things I look into this audience is, yes, there are people here actually from other political parties, but I'm also aware that there are younger people here and there are older people here. There are men here and there are women here. And I will be blunt as I always am. I have been into our party's conference arena and I have seen, frankly, not enough women there, not enough of the more middle-aged and older people there, not enough brown faces there, and not enough black faces there either. And I say, what is happening to this great party of ours? And the simple truth is that Brexit has done many bad things for our country, and we haven't even left yet. And goodness me, it's done some bad things to our party as well. Some of us have already experienced the takeover, the infiltration, the entryism from people who are not conservatives. They do not share conservative values. They have joined with one determined effort. They want to oust our Prime Minister and they want to take our party to the extremes, to the rights of British politics. And we will not allow that to happen. People I have known since I first joined the Conservative Party as a student. We will not dwell on those days, Mr. Leverton. We will not discuss some of the things that we got up to. We've moved
Fields of wheat.
Great happy times. The point is this. As Philip so absolutely, beautifully and articulately explained, we were once the mainstream. We were able happily to support our party's views on the European Union and indeed the whole of our future in the world. We were, as I say, the mainstream. I asked this question to the leader of the Conservative Party and to the chairman of the Conservative Party. Would someone like me, Philip Lee, Neil, or even Justine, actually now even get onto the candidates list? And many of you will know that for decades, those that had a very different view of our policy on the European Union not only got onto the candidates list without any problem, they sailed into safe seats. That again is a sign of how much our party has changed, that we now find ourselves on the margins. We now feel we have no place in our party, and that can't be right. I want to speak, if I may, to the 48%. Because I have a great deal of time for Theresa May. I voted for Theresa to be the leader of our party and our Prime Minister. But I think a mistake that has been made was to make the 48% feel as if they counted and they were valued as for nothing. When that referendum result came through, it was for many of us a genuinely heartbreaking moment. And I get a bit tired of people who pour scorn on some of the things that I've said. And it's true, my 80-plus-year-old mother went into the garden, she shed tears. Because, of course, she's of a generation that remembered the Second World War. She saw Sheffield burning when the Nazis bombed it. For her, the European Union was about peace. For her, that's what that generation in particular. For many younger people, it was about prosperity, as Neil has said. Who was the great author of the single market? Who championed the single market? Margaret Thatcher. And look what happened to her. As you know, those of us, and there haven't been many of us at times, who have stood up and continued to speak out against what has happened. Even though we voted to trigger Article 50, we said we would respect the result, and that is what we did. But goodness me, we have all of us been treated in a most appalling way. To be called an enemy of the people, as our great judges were. To be called traitors and mutineers. And I'm sorry to have to say this, but I think the leadership of our party stood by and allowed that to happen, and they should have called it out and condemned it for what it was. party of Brexit. Brexit means Brexit, whatever the hell that meant. I'll dwell on that in a minute. And then the other great nonsense, dangerous nonsense, to suggest that no deal was better than a bad deal. Let's be clear. No deal would be a total disaster for this country. For anybody to think that that is a credible option is living in a fantasy world. It would be a disaster for jobs, for prosperity, for business, and we are actually still the party of business. It's just sometimes some of our people forget that. And of course it would be a disaster for peace in Northern Ireland. That's not us weaponising that issue. It's about us facing up to the reality of Brexit. Because one of the things that's happened, and why I came over to a People's Vote, and I was proud to launch it cross-party with people like Chukaramuna, with Layla Moran from the Lib Dems, Caroline Lucas from the Green Party. I was so proud to do that, and frankly, we launched it to a bit of a non-fanfare. It was I think it made page 5 of The Guardian, and that was at least we got somewhere. But look where we are now, holding a meeting like this, with people having to stand, it's standing room only. But the reason for that was because even I'm not some Euro fanatic. I was the business minister. I learned so much in my time as a business minister as to the economic benefits of our membership of the European Union. But the reality of Brexit began to dawn, even on people like me, that frankly we had made this absolutely terrible mistake. But I have no doubt at all that the way forward now is for this momentous decision to go back to the British people. And it's
Absolutely.
I've lived almost my whole life in Nottingham, in the Nottingham area, and I stood in the Market Square in Nottingham on Saturday, and the thing that really struck me wasn't just those people who voted Leave, who now say, I want a people's vote and I want us to remain in the European Union, but was those number of Leave voters, those good, sensible friends and neighbours, members of our own families, who as Brexit reality has dawned, who's now, as they've understood it, who've realised, it's not just the £350 million on the bus a week that we won't be getting for the NHS, but the threats to jobs, to prosperity, to peace, and so on and so forth. These are the people who are saying, I'm not sure we've got this right. And it won't be long, too, before they say, I now want to say about not my future, the future for my children and my grandchildren. So, friends, this is what I urge you to do. Simply get out on the streets. Now, this man here has been out. Yay! I can testify, because I walked past him, of -15 right up to 33 degrees. He has been out there on the streets and Parliament. But in all seriousness, if we are to win a people's vote, we must go out and convince the people of the country it's the right thing to do. I'll be blunt as ever. We need funds for our campaign. We work with the National People's Vote as well. We need to get out there. We need to make the case that this is the most momentous decision that our country has taken since the Second World War. People have a right to a say on the deal or no deal, and Remain goes on the paper. And friends, we have only 6 months to save our country. So let's get out there and make this
Hey! Hey!
No means least, Admiral Justin.
Hooray!
What a fantastic turnout this lunchtime. It's just brilliant to see so many people here supporting, I think, the right for people to have a final say on the route forward in relation to Brexit. I've always been a pragmatist on Europe. I can honestly say I did not come into politics to talk about Europe, Brexit, all of that. I came into politics because I wanted to work with brilliant people like the city year bloke at the back, young people, to drive a better version of the country than perhaps the one that I'd grown up in. But the bottom line is, what I realised over recent months is we can't get to any of that. Because this thing is in the way. And until our country resolves a path forward, actually we don't get to talk about the things that matter to people day to day, that they're really interested in, whether it's more opportunity, whether it's always took opportunity, because we're not talking at the moment about anything apart from Brexit. But I reached the conclusion that there is no other viable route forward for our country or for our party than going back out to people and giving them a final say and giving the people a vote on Brexit. People might say, well, we've already had one. Absolutely, and I campaigned for Remain. And I've always respected the result. But I do think that 2 years down the road, people had a sense that the pieces would have fallen into place and that Parliament would have taken forward this decision. And then actually, that's not happened. The pieces haven't fallen into place. And with just weeks to go before a crucial deal is apparently to be sealed, some of the most basic issues still remain. Whether it's in relation to the Northern Ireland border, whether it's in relation to how our businesses are going to be able to continue to trade after the 29th of March next year. And it doesn't matter whether you're a massive Euro. Yeah. But I think what it shows is that in the end, whatever the Brexiteers might think, actually we haven't settled this. And I think they increasingly recognise that themselves. They have to. Because they're currently arguing with our Prime Minister about what Brexit means. Still. So her version of Brexit absolutely isn't what most leaders in my own community thought Brexit was all about, being absolutely fair to them. And I have a problem with the fact that I am one MP in Parliament. I will cast a vote on the meaningful deal, but I know I'll be voting in a way that disenfranchises Leave voters in my patch. And all of this is wrong. It's far too important as a vote to have 650 people cast a vote on behalf of 40 odd million adults in our country. And I think the other reason why I just reached the conclusion there was no other route forward, I mean, obviously Parliament is at stalemate. I think that's just a fact. The Chequers deal isn't going to get through. I don't think a Canada deal will get through. No deal will absolutely be voted down and against by Parliament. Those are just facts. But a responsible Parliament has to face up to facts and find a route through to the British public that it's there to represent. And at the moment, we haven't done that. But we are going to reach that stalemate. We are going to reach that moment. And we are then going to have to decide what we do about it. And it's always been very clear to me that there is no other route forward than having some kind of a referendum, a people's vote. Because the problem with Brexit has always been that it is this thing that sits above party politics, trying to get through a place called Westminster that entirely functions on the basis of party politics. It's been like trying to put diesel petrol into an unleaded car. And I think when people write about this period in our history in the future, they won't be surprised that our Parliament and our political parties found it impossible, really, to get to grips with how you deal with Brexit. But get to grips we must. And I think that, combined with the fact that pieces have not fallen into place, that combined with the fact that, crucially, this is the first time any generation of voters has knowingly fettered the choices of a future generation of voters. This means we have to go back out to people. This means that a double lock before we leave the EU, for people to actually decide, not on the theory, which I feel like was the question back in 2016, but on the practice, on the practical options. We have to go back out and ask them that. Because if we were to leave and people were then to say, well, this isn't working out the way I wanted it to, I want to go back in, we won't go back in on the same terms. So it is absolutely cutting down the choices of a future generation of voters. And I think the fact that we know that for young people this is not a direction anyway that they want this country to go in, we have to do the right thing by them and allow them to have a say on the route that people are being proposed to take in Parliament and by this government. There is no other way forward. I have to say, as a Conservative, and as a Conservative at a time when our party is the party in government, I know that the words Tory Brexit will be ringing through the country forever and a day.
Yes.
You know, and there'll be no pivoting for our party if this doesn't work out. There'll be no way to say, well, you know, the national minimum wage. We weren't in favour of that when it went through, but we now know we got it wrong. This isn't that kind of an issue. And so we shouldn't have a strategy of guess and hope. Guess that this is the right route forward that people now want, and then hope that it all works out on something this profound, on something this important, on something that we know for millions of young people, it's a direction they don't want us to go in. I just don't think you can do that. I don't think it's right, and I don't think it's smart. And I certainly don't think it's any kind of a basis for bringing our country back together on a route forward that we finally pick. And I just want to finish off by saying that as difficult as this is for our country, and as difficult as it is for the parties, people do have passionate and genuinely held views on our relationship with Europe. My conclusion is I think we'll always be debating this. We will always be an island that's part of a big continent called Europe, that feels a bit disconnected from it, but is intrinsically, geographically, absolutely part of it. And I think we need to realise as a country that this debate is one we'll probably continue to have, as exhausting as that might seem to all of us. We've got to try and respect those differences, but I'm afraid we do need to find a route forward, because we can't go nowhere. And the only people who can now do that for Parliament are going to be the British people. And we shouldn't see that as some kind of a problem in a democracy. We should see it as a good thing. We should have the confidence to put these final routes to them, and have the confidence to allow them to have their say. I know what I'd be campaigning for. I'd be campaigning for Remain. But the bottom line is, fundamentally, most importantly, I'm a Democrat. And I think we now have to go back to the people, and the people now have to decide. Thank you.
Absolutely packed in here.
Thank you, Justine, and all your esteemed current and former parliamentary colleagues. I'll say a quick word perhaps to someone who's never actually sat in the House, looking in from the outside, and I'd pick up perhaps on Philip's comments. Obviously Philip is Dr. Philip Lee, and we also have Dr. Sarah Wollaston and Dr. Charles Tannock. And this concept of informed consent, I think, is a very important one. But I would make the point, as a non-parliamentarian, that it's actually something we come across in our daily lives all the time. It's really important that people know what they're having to choose when they choose it. When you buy a car, you get to do a test drive. When you buy a house, you can do a local authority search and a survey. When you buy insurance, you have a 2-week cooling off period. If you're in business and you're acquiring another business, you get to do what's called due diligence. You can look at the business and see if what you were told was accurate, and if it's not, you can change the terms or you can pull out. What we're being told with Brexit is you're allowed to vote on it when you don't yet understand what it means, but you're not allowed to vote on it when you do understand it.
Yeah.
That strikes me as particularly crazy, and it's something which I think that the political bubble is lost in this. But when we hear it's against the will of the people, I mean, I would make the point, we're not hearing the will of the people very much anymore from the Leavers, are we? Because actually the will of the people is now to remain. However, and it's important, we all do respect democracy. I think if you're a Leaver and you have the questions over the last referendum, which was quite narrowly won, and there's issues about the legitimacy of your arguments, and there's issues about your spending, and you know that the young people are increasingly coming onto the electoral roll and are Remainers, a final referendum is the last chance to validate your thesis. And I think Leavers should be waking up to that, because if a deal that Theresa May brings back squeaks through Parliament on a heavily whipped vote, with threats of deselection hanging over MPs, by 2 or 3 votes, when opinion polls are showing 85% of the country doesn't support it, that will be really damaging for our democracy and really damaging for the legitimacy of Parliament. So I think Leavers as well as Remainers should come and think about this very hard, because it may be their last chance to put their case and win it. Now, we have 20 minutes left. My esteemed colleagues have agreed to take questions, so I'll take two at once to begin with, one from you, sir, and one from you, sir.
Ned Simons from Huffington Post. How many of your Tory MP colleagues do you think privately also back having people's vote?
He said, how many of our Conservative MP colleagues privately support people's vote?
My point is, I find it hard to disagree with a thing that was said from the table this afternoon, and as someone who has followed Brexit obsessively, followed it on Twitter, on the television, lived the roller coaster ride of the Commons votes, I just want to hear from the panel, please, this time, hold firm.
On numbers, I'm not talking numbers, but what I do know, and I think the others, Justine and Philip, will confirm, I think there is a growing feeling that it is the only way out of what is increasingly looking like that impasse in Parliament. And if we reach that impasse in Parliament, I think it was an argument that Justine extremely well, she made it extremely well, that if we reach that point, well, where else do we go? And I think that that is something that is growing in people's minds. But privately, one of the problems, as you know, is that there hasn't been enough honest debate in our country, because those who didn't believe in this, so didn't support the will of the people, and we could argue about whether it actually was a majority of people who were entitled to vote, but it has meant that people have not spoken out, and I think that's been appalling for democracy, that there are so many private conversations that should be now public conversations, and notably, if I may say, from British business.
Yeah.
Politics is human. Colleagues are under huge amounts of pressure, be it from their electorates, be it from entryism, be it from their associations. And so any support you can give colleagues would be welcome on a personal level.
Yes.
Because it's tough. It really is tough. I agree with Anna. It's about time that the private conversations that we're having with colleagues, but also with business, started being more public. Panasonic announced it was moving its European headquarters from my constituency to Amsterdam a few weeks ago. Although it was a modest number of jobs, 50, it actually has had quite a few ripples locally. Now, I actually know that there are other companies, but they will not go public for various reasons. And I think they should. And I think if you can have any pressure on them to do so, please apply it. Because fundamentally, it isn't just about Parliament, it's about the context where colleagues find themselves. If these things were more public, I think colleagues would feel more confident in asserting what they truly believe. I suspect there are, in straight answer to your question, significant numbers of colleagues who can see the argument for a second vote. I know of 3 ministers who do, who I've direct conversations with. But it is a difficult environment for them to come out, and I understand that and I respect that, because I didn't find it easy at all in June to do it, because essentially I'm a loyal member of my party, long-standing. But fundamentally, I came to the judgment that if there's one thing I'm in politics for, is to pass on a better legacy to the next generation. And to stand idly by, remain mute on the most important political issue of a generation, I thought was the wrong thing to do. It would have been dishonourable to stay as a minister, so I resigned. I think some others are on the cusp, but it needs public support, business support, and I think you'll see more come out and support us.
Well done.
Charles Tannock, and then we'll have the lady there.
Thank you, Simon. Maybe not Britain's last MEP if we're successful in our struggles. But I think we are winning this debate on the people's vote. But my fear now is that Mrs May and Mr Corbyn may agree to a second referendum with only 2 voices on the ballot paper. Their bad deal or no deal, which is ridiculous. How can the panel assure us that we will be able to make absolutely clear that that would not be democratic? We have to have a Remain option in informed consent.
My question actually leads on from Charles's question. In David Cameron's manifesto, I believe a Votes for Life was included. So if we do manage to get a people's vote, are there going to be votes for the British in Europe, who've been there for more than 15 years, and or the European citizens who are here?
So, I mean, just to respond to the questions we've had, I think there's a growing body of Conservative MPs that have thought their way through this, as we have, and reached the same logical conclusion that a referendum is the only way you can unblock a parliament stalemate. For various reasons, they don't maybe have the moment that they are going to come out and say that, but I think a growing number of Conservative MPs recognise this. It's a question of when they will make their views known, I think, rather than if. And I think that when the moment comes, I'll be holding firm, as you put it, because I just think this is a historic vote coming up in Parliament, and it's not normal party politics. This is something that sits above all of that for MPs, and they have to make sure they remember that when they troop through the lobbies, because they really will be accountable, like they should be, to their local communities. And this sits above all the whipping, and in fact, even, you know, the reluctance and the fact that there will absolutely be no free vote in Parliament, that tells you everything you need to know about the problem with this approach that's currently being taken, and really that then ties me into Charles's point. If you stamp down on what people's views are, if you don't allow all the options that Britain has really got ahead of it on the ballot paper, then you don't put this to bed. All you do is leave a lingering sore. And I actually think that what would happen is you'd just have probably 18 odd million people spoil their ballots, presumably.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can have a half debate on the routes forward for any second referendum. I think we should have the confidence, but also do the right thing and put all the options on. And I have to say, I think when we saw Labour last week trying to suggest it might just be two, it's a wake-up call for young people, because it actually turns out that Jeremy Corbyn is just like all the other politicians. He's doing what he thinks is best for him and best as a tactical move. And actually, it turns out it's not about giving people all the options that they really want. It's about trying to manage their own party management as ever. And I just think our relationship with the EU, Brexit, it deserves better than that. And that means going back to people. And as for the how you do the referendum, in a funny way, I felt listening to the argument in Labour last week. I mean, it's a step forward, isn't it? I mean, this time 3 or 4 months ago, no one was even talking about how you do a referendum, who'd be eligible to vote in it. We are now, and I think that's the right debate to be moving on to, because actually the more we can have a debate now about this, then the better place we'll be to chart that route forward when the moment comes and actually we do find out that, surprise, surprise, Parliament is at an impasse.
Yeah, I think there are 2 words we should always remember about this. The first is vision. We need politicians to understand what they are going to look at, how far they can look, and what they see when they're actually looking. You've got to have a vision about the future. And my vision about the future is not a good one if we do not actually act properly, as we've discussed in the last 45 minutes. So vision is critical, but so too is courage. You cannot have a vision if you're going to faff around and allow things to evaporate. You've got to drive it forward. The best politicians are the ones who understand where they're going and have the courage to get there, across the humps and the bumps if necessary, but that's what's called for. And that's really the answer to the question about where we go and how we get there. And the 2 points, one made by Charles, is equally important. We need Remain on that ballot paper. How do we get it? We say it, that's what we want, and we mean what we say. And we reach out to the other politicians in other parties which actually also understand that message. Because much to everybody's surprise, and in Liverpool, I was there. And I noticed that there's an appetite for a sensible discussion in parts of that party. And we've got to reach out to them, because this could be a national crisis of a mega size if we don't watch out. And of course, the lady who I can't see because of the television camera, which I'm really pleased to be seeing, is absolutely right. Everybody who's got an interest in this should be voting. It's obvious. And we need to say so. If we go around saying we're Democrats, then for heaven's sake, be democratic.
To give a little to seniority, there's a chap called Dorrell at the back who would quite like
Stephen Dorrell. I chair the European Movement, which is one of the organisations behind the National People's Vote campaign. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to you, Simon, and to your panel for convening this meeting outside the secure zone in order to demonstrate that there are still Conservatives who are prepared to make this case. I'm older than Philip. I joined the Conservative Party in 1969 when Ted Heath was leader, who took us into what was then the common market. I served in John Major's cabinet, who people will have seen this weekend saying again that Brexit is, in John's words, an historic mistake. So my key plea is that there should be the maximum possible number of Conservatives on the Freedom March on the 20th of October. Democratic decision about this question is not colonised by the Labour Party or by the Liberal Democrats, and there is seen to be active Conservative support for a people's vote as the only legitimate and democratic way of deciding this issue.
That was Stephen Dorrell.
Katie Dunn, British Irish Chamber of Commerce. I'm kind of taking up on the point that Justine made about the hows of the referendum and whether it's been left too late to actually run another referendum. Constitutional lawyer we spoke to on this issue said it could take 9 months minimum to run a referendum, which obviously then takes you past the Brexit deadline. So I suppose when's the cut-off point for doing this, and how can we make sure that it does happen within the window? Because from meetings we've had in Brussels, I don't think there's much of an appetite on the EU side to extend the negotiations much further than what they are due to the practicalities of their upcoming elections and also the change of commission and things like that. So just in the practical terms, how this could work.
Well, I refute the suggestion that the other 27 wouldn't extend. They would for the purpose of having a second referendum. I'm pretty confident in asserting that in terms of the process and how long it takes, like anything in life, ask a lawyer, every lawyer will give you a different answer. It's an organic business, isn't it? Or it changes. This person told me you could do it in a month. So I think realistically we probably would have to extend. I think we probably would want to extend so that we could have a proper debate about the issues. There is the complication around the European Parliament elections and answers on a postcard, please. But if there's a political will, then it is possible to deliver.
Can I just say that the People's Vote, and Stephen was part of this group, that we did this roadmap to a People's Vote, and it was chaired by the marvellous Lord John Kerr, who was the author actually of Article 50. If I may say, if anybody who knows about it, it's going to be John Kerr, but the roadmap clearly sets it out, and it is absolutely possible to do this. And I think, as Philip has said, the other member states would allow the extension of Article 50 that we would, I think, undoubtedly need in order to develop a people's vote. I believe where there's a will, there's a way. Now we've got to build the will.
Yes.
Stephen Edgington from Westminster. Why should anyone trust you to respect the result of the second referendum that you're calling for, seeing as, you know, Justin Greening, Neil Carmichael and Philip Lee all said before the first referendum that you would respect that result? And that is a lie, because you are calling for a second referendum because you lost. So why should anyone trust you to respect that second referendum and not call for a third referendum because you just didn't like the result?
That's a good question. Fair question.
Well, I think from my perspective, that's a bit like saying to somebody, you don't like the result voting in Tony Blair in 1997, so there should never be any other election in case people change their mind. I'd turn it back and say, actually, what's the problem with going back to check with people on a monumental, irreversible decision? And actually, anyone who actually wants to reflect the will of the British people, presumably, would have no problems with going back and double checking that the version of Brexit that's being proposed is the one that they want, and then comparing that to the alternative, which is, again, to stay exactly where they're at now. And I think if the Brexit, I personally have already said that I think this referendum should be binding. I mean, the last one obviously was seen as advisory. We had a court case around all of that. But yeah, I do think it should be binding, and I think we've got to reach a conclusion on this. I think if the Brexiteers and Leavers had been able to agree on leave, then maybe we wouldn't be in this position. It's the continued argument between Brexiteers, in a sense, that has got us to where we've been. You know, I'll be frank, I fully sat round the cabinet table, ready, willing and able to get on with this result. And I had hoped that the pieces could fall into place given we'd had that vote, but actually they haven't. And you can't just ignore that. And I'm still waiting for the pieces to fall into place, and they haven't. And that tells me that actually this is monumental. There are some challenges around it, and you have to go back and ask people if they're absolutely certain, given where we are now, whether that's really what they want to do. And given the fact that the Brexiteers themselves are now split into different camps. Something you can do checkers, and something you can't. So let's find out what people actually want.
So this is the answer.
This will be arguing about Europe for the foreseeable future. I think we all have to realise it's just part of the UK's DNA to be debating our relationship as part of this amazing continent that we're geographically a part of and always will be. It's just a feature of life, and maybe we should recognise that our role as almost an antagonist, you know, the country that's not quite the same as the Frances and Germanys, means we're always going to have a relationship with other countries in Europe. That means we do look at things from a slightly different angle, and that will provoke debate, and we need to recognise that that's healthy. It might feel like it's arguments, but actually it's healthy debate at the end of the day, and that's just the nature of the beast.
In response, I've not voted at any point to stop the government proceeding with Brexit.
No, me neither.
No, neither have I.
don't
Even I haven't.
Exactly. I'm fully aware of what I'm on record saying, but allow me to stretch the medical analogy a bit. In 2016, the pathologist report came out to say there's this cancer. And then in 2018, the report gets full. It's not actually a cancer anymore, it's benign. Do you proceed? I mean, the problem with this is that I'm not convinced at all that enough information was known about what Brexit entailed. I am not convinced the public understood that there'd be a delay in getting access to medicines, that the way in which food was going to be produced, all of the complexity. I wasn't aware of everything. You know, and I'm paid to be aware of everything. And I can honestly admit, the detail, the complexity of our relationship, the fact that I am somehow bound by this referendum, that I cannot call for another act of democracy to get us out of this impasse, I find it's a nonsense, absolute nonsense.
Secretary yesterday was comparing the EU to the Soviet Union.
Shameful.
Well, in the Soviet Union, we know how democracy works. It's one person, one vote, once.
But you still haven't
I
answered the
hope
question.
the UK
why
is
should
not
we
going
trust
down
you?
that route.
But why should we trust you to respect the second one?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think we've respected the first one. That's the whole point. We've gone through the process of trying to work this out. And guess what? The people who are the greatest advocates for it, they still cannot agree on what it means. I am no fan of referenda. I didn't want to have the first one. A fellow Brexiteer walks out on a meeting I was in just because I suggested that I thought it might end up like this. And 2 years on, it has ended up like this. If we have another referendum, I am praying it is the last time we have a referendum on a complex issue.
Here, here.
A simple
Nicholas McLean. I'm on the government's committee for Canada, and I'm very concerned by the Jacobins in the Tory party who are now more and more quoting Canada plus plus as the way forward. My question to the panel is, how can we have a campaign in the people's vote based on truth and fairness, much more than we had last time?
Well, I think one of the things that if we get our people's vote, we can be sure about is that we will run a considerably better campaign than the last campaign. I think you're right. I think you've got to square up with people. I think people are beginning to know and understand more, but it's damn difficult. Look, let's be honest about it. When you vote in a general election, you vote for a party that shares your values, that basically you trust as being competent, and then you keep an eye on that government, really from the corner of your eye. You're not involved in the minutiae of trade deals and all sorts of other things. And the problem is with this, is that we have said to people, you make a decision, and then you understand just-in-time supply chains. I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, most members of Parliament don't understand a just-in-time supply chain. So why on earth would the British people? I mean, it is quite outrageous what we've done. And that's what I would say to what's going to be my new friend over here. Because things have become clear. Become clear to members of Parliament, some of whom didn't even have the first clue as to how a customs union worked.
Nadine.
So it will be absolutely. You said that was me. But it's really important, this. That's why in the People's Vote we are already trying to explain to people what the Canadian deal is all about. You know, Carolyn Fairbairn from the CBI, apparently they know nothing about British business now, according to a Conservative MP who's never even run a whelk stall. Did you see her great speech when she explained that normally in a trade deal you have a bloc and a country that are here, and then they have a deal to bring them here. A Canadian-style deal, ladies and gentlemen, will take a bloc and a country that are already here and take them there. Never been done before in the history of the world. But you can explain things to people. But that is what we need to do. We now need to get out, make the case for a people's vote, and then if we win that, make damn sure that this time we get it right, we explain the arguments, because the difference between this and the referendum is that this is about the deal. This is actually the end of the road. This is about the deal, whether we want any deal and whether or not we want to remain in the European Union, because all things concerned, that's the best option for our country.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
Out of time. time, and it'll take a while to clear this packed room. A big thank you to all my colleagues on the platform. I think we had a great debate, and the group is up, Conservatives for People's Vote. We do need monetary support, we do need supporters in the country, we need you to register as a supporter, to get the message out, to wear the badges at conference, to make a noise. Thank you all very much for coming, we'll see you around.
Thank you.
No, we'll try.
No, it looks like him. I don't know, it's not.
Oh, sorry, Bob. You're sure it's not?
Yes.